Can a team as legendary as Ferrari fall into a spiral of errors so deep that not even Lewis Hamilton, 7-time world champion, can rescue him? And what role does Bernie Ecclestone play in all this with its incendiary statements? The media outbreak generated by Bernie Ecclestone was not an accident or a simple provocation. His statement about Hamilton as a bit political is not an isolated criticism, but a carefully framed accusation within decades of frustration accumulated with the way Ferrari manages his talent, his resources, and his image. Ecclestone, who directed F1 as a perfect machinery of power and narrative, understands as no one the symbolic weight of Ferrari and the multiplier effect that has any word directed towards Maranello. When questioning openly if hiring Hamilton was the right decision, Ecclestone is not talking only about performance. It is hinting at a fracture in the strategic vision of the most iconic sport team. These types of comments come from someone who has lived with all the eras de Ferrari, from the institutional chaos of the 80s to the technical dictatorship of Jean Todt and Ross Brawn in the Schumacher era. And precisely because of that, their words have a subtext that resonates strong inside the paddock. Ecclestone sees in the current Ferrari a distorted mirror of what used to be an imposing team, now caught in a cross-interest network, hurried decisions, and a media obsession for the show rather than by the result. The main target of his criticism, Lewis Hamilton, is described as a politician inside the track. But that characterization is not free. What Ecclestone really hints is that Hamilton, with his aura of media influence, his public activism, and his ability to mold narratives in his favor, can end up dominating Ferrari's internal structure, something that historically only has been allowed figures such as Michael Schumacher under specific conditions of absolute success. Unlike Schumacher, Hamilton has not arrived as Salvador, but as a symbol, and that, in the Ferrari universe, can be as dangerous as promising. The most revealing is not what Ecclestone said, but what he showed, that the Ferrari-Hamilton alliance can be condemned from the beginning if clear hierarchies and a sports direction that put the results above the individual prestige are established. The mere mention of his politicism serves as a warning that for Ecclestone, Ferrari has replaced the hunger of glory with an obsessive search for narrative, and that, for a performance purist like him, is unacceptable. His criticism also comes at a time of maximum vulnerability for the team, without podiums in 14 careers, with systematic technical failures, and with an internal environment rarely rare by unclear administrative decisions. In that environment, each word of Ecclestone acts as a carefully placed bomb to detonate internal conversations that Ferrari herself seems to avoid. Its objective is not only to attract attention, but to cause a shake in the management of the team and in the public perception of its current leadership. The SF25 has been one of the greatest technical enigmas of the 2025 season. What in paper should be a revolutionary car, aimed at closing the gap with McLaren and positioning itself as a candidate for the title, has ended up becoming a constant source of frustration for its pilots, especially for Hamilton, which came to Ferrari waiting for a competitive car, and was found with a puzzle. The first thing to understand is that the problems of SF25 are not simple setup errors or circuit adaptations. It is not a lack of generic aerodynamic load or an occasional loss of traction. It is much more serious. Technically, we are talking about a rear suspension architecture that is unbalanced from the base design, unable to maintain dynamic stability in variable conditions. This directly affects the aerodynamic equilibrium in rapid curve, one of the critical factors in the performance of a modern Formula One. The flat background, one of the most sensitive components of the entire car, has also been indicated as another focus of instability. During the GP of Spain, engineers detected an anomaly that manifested in an abrupt degradation of aerodynamic balance as the race advanced. The alarming thing was that both cars of both Hamilton and Leclerc showed identical symptoms: high-speed subviring, bouncing in intense lateral load areas, and a significant loss of adhesion when the track temperature exceeded certain thresholds. That is, it was not a pilot failure. It was a systemic failure. This situation led the team to make a decision that borders on the surrealist: explicitly ask their pilots to not speak publicly about technical problems. An order reminiscent of Ferrari's darkest years, when the culture of silence prevailed about the need to solve errors. This concealment policy not only deteriorates internal morals, but also erodes the relationship between engineers, directive, and pilots. An elite team needs fluid communication, does not censure. At the operational level, this has forced Ferrari to experiment with extreme configurations. To keep the car stable, they must sacrifice aerodynamic efficiency or durability of the components. In some circuits such as Suzuka, this has resulted in adjustments so extreme that the SF25 literally brushes technical illegality, plates of the soil to the wear limit, rake levels that compromise the braking, and suspension geometries that reduce the operating window of the tire to just ideal laps. To all this is added a cultural problem. The team seems more concerned about appearances than because of the radical solution that the situation demands. The updates introduced in Austria were late and partial. It was a new floor divided into 4 sections, designed in the wind tunnel during the winter, but even that was more a measure of containment than a true conceptual leap. The SF25 is a car that needs redesign, do not touch up. The most painful paradox is that, in terms of peak speed, the Ferrari is still competitive. In fact, in line, the SF25 is one of the fastest in the championship. But that speed is obtained thanks to a drag reduction, which in turn sacrifices aerodynamic load in curve. The result is a fast car in a straight line, but fearful in each entry to a technical section. The pilot must fight the steering wheel more than he should. And in Formula One, that is not driving, that is to survive. And this is where the Hamilton case becomes more interesting. Because for a pilot of his caliber, accustomed to a stable platform such as Mercedes's W11, the SF25 represents a mechanical nightmare. He has had to modify his braking style, change his trajectories, and readjust his curved confidence. And he has done it. But while he evolves, the car remains a technical barrier, not as an ally. This technical disaster is not another chapter. It is a symptom of something much deeper, a team that has failed to evolve to the rhythm required by the current era of F1. While McLaren explores aggressive designs and Red Bull reconfigures all its alignment to save its season, Ferrari is still trapped in a dynamic of partial solutions, without accepting that the SF25 does not need adjustments. It needs major surgery. And then a new dilemma appears. Is Ferrari ready to give power to his star pilot to save his season, or will he prefer to hold on to his rigid internal hierarchy, even if that means another year without titles? That is the true silent rebellion. Because Hamilton does not need to raise his voice. His piloting, his times, his adjustments, and his technical leadership are building an argument that no one inside Ferrari can ignore. Oh, the team changes, or he will become, with facts, the only viable technical reference within the box. What we are witnessing in Ferrari is not a simple transition stage. It is the break point of a management model that has proven insufficient against the current modern F1 challenges. Hamilton, with his experience, is revealing all the cracks of the system. Not with explosive statements, but with telemetry, evolution, and results. And if Ferrari does not react, the true revolution will not arrive with victories. It will arrive with an exit that would mark the failure of one of the most symbolic signings in the history of motor racing. Bernie Ecclestone's words did not fall as a simple opinion. They were a judgment not officially declared, but full of intentions. A silent trial that goes beyond Hamilton, beyond even the performance of the SF25. What Ecclestone shows is a concern that only those who know the foundations of this sport can identify, that Ferrari has lost the north. Not only because he doesn't win, but because he has stopped wondering why he doesn't win. Ferrari seems to continue working with short-term logic, patch, emotion rather than engineering. Ecclestone, with his experience accumulated in the global management of this sport, perceives that disorder not as a coincidence, but as an inevitable consequence of a culture that resists structural change. And in that vision, Hamilton is not the problem. Because if a pilot like Lewis Hamilton, with 7 championships, an unwavering work ethic, and an internal transformation history in Mercedes, he does not yet manage to lead a true technical resurgence in Ferrari, then the problem is deeper than many want to accept. Ecclestone knows it, and that's why he supports Hamilton implicitly. His criticism is aimed at Maranello's halls, to chiefs who protect their reputation before their results, to engineers who fear being questioned, and departments that operate under obsolete structures. It must be understood that for Ecclestone, the F1 was always a war of power, strategy, and narrative control. And in that game, Ferrari has lost the ability to control his own story. Before, each victory was an Italian epic. Today, each race seems a crisis contained, and every statement an attempt to turn off fires instead of turning ambitions. In that context, his judgment on Hamilton's hiring is not a criticism of talent, but to the inability of the team to accompany a leader, to hold it, to build around him. The most worrying thing is that Ferrari seems to have lost the urgency. That hunger that pushed the team to build technical empires, to sign bright minds regardless of the cost, to redesign a complete philosophy in order to win. Today, the feeling that Ferrari transmits is that of a giant who expects glory to return to inertia. As if the story was enough. As if the red color had strategic value on its own. And that, for someone like Ecclestone, who turned F1 into a global business for its obsession with performance, is unforgivable. His judgment is, in reality, a warning. If Ferrari does not change the route, not in the logos, not in the press releases, but in their way of understanding sport, technology, and talent management, no matter how many world champions hire, the result will always be the same: frustration, nostalgia, and the constant repetition of what could be and was not.